So for our design unit, we're going to end up making, after we go through some things with the design principles and make sure that everybody understands the concepts of design, you guys will each be making your own set of 4 designs for this unit. And I'm going to have you put the 4 designs or make the 4 designs in an accordion book. So I know these just look like square pieces of paper to you right now, but they are actually little accordion books that I made. And as you can see in this accordion book, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 faces on it on one side. And those will be where you are actually be creating your design. And the reason why I decided to have you guys do this in an accordion book is for a couple of reasons. Number one, it makes a really nice presentation in the end, just sort of by default to have 4 different designs that sort of relate to one another in an accordion book. So just presentation wise, it makes sort of this nice thing that you have in the end. And then the other pro to using an accordion book is you don't have to keep track of 4 separate designs. I know that there are some of you who are organized and some of you who are not as organized. And this just enables you, it kind of forces you to be organized and keep your project all in one kind of like tidy little book all together. Okay, so it's all for the sake of organization so that in the end, all your work is kind of together in one thing. So that is the reason why we will be using accordion books for our design project. All right, so what I'm starting with here are 3 sheets of 11 by 14 pieces of paper that I got from 11 by 14 size sketchbook. So I just tore them out. I tore the perforated edge off, and that's where I got my paper from. So no matter which size you're working with, whether you have larger sheets to cut out from, or you're using printer paper, which I will demo later on in the video if that's all you have to work with, you need to have 3 sheets to construct your book. So first, I am going to cut this paper down a little bit because I don't want it to be this big. This piece of paper is too big. And I want your accordion books to be in a square format. I want your designs to be in a square format because when working with design, working within a square is a simpler way to figure out design. So for this design unit, we'll be working within a square. I noticed that if I fold my paper in half, which I'm going to be doing in the end to make my accordion book, because it's 14 inches long, if I fold it in half, which I eventually will be doing, half of 14 is 7. So in order to end up with a square accordion book, I measured up the side to 7 inches, right? So I just used my ruler, and at the 7-inch mark or point, I made a mark. 7-inch point, I made a mark, and then I drew a line across, and that's going to make my piece of paper that I'm making the accordion book with 7 inches tall, basically. Now, I can do that for all of these and cut them out individually, but since I have this one already marked out, what I can do, because all the pieces of paper are the same size, is I can put them all together and then cut them. Okay, so I just measured up 7 inches, made a mark, measured up 7 inches, made a mark. We did something very similar when we were measuring out our value scales. In order to make a straight line across, I made the marks first, and then I just used my ruler to connect the marks. I apologize, my paper is longer than the view will allow. But then I just used the ruler to draw a line across, and that makes my piece of paper 7 inches wide or tall, however you want to look at it. Now I'm taking all 3 pieces of paper, putting them together, making sure they're all together and flush on the edges, and then carefully taking my scissors and cutting slowly along this line so I can get a nice straight edge. If you happen to have like maybe you're into scrapbooking or someone in your home is into scrapbooking. You might have one of those little paper cutter doodads. I don't have one at home. I only have a paper cutter at school, but if you have a paper cutter, that's even better because then you know you'll be getting a nice straight edge. But scissors work fine too. I would imagine most of you, that's how you'll be doing this. Okay. So now I've got 3 pieces of paper that measure 7 by 14. Right, 7 on the short side, 14 on the long side. And now what I'm going to do is fold each in half. So just take the paper, fold the long way, so hamburger as opposed to hot dog. Fold corner to corner, do this step again carefully. Make a nice fold and do that with all 3 pieces of your paper. So again, your measurements might be a little different depending on what size piece of paper you have to begin with. If you have a 9 by 12 sheet of paper from your, say you have your sketchbook, and a lot of standard sketchbooks are 9 by 12, then you might want to make a 9, actually that would end up, if you folded the longer side in half, that would end up being like a 6 by 6 square once you folded it in half. So I think once you just do this along with the video, what I'm saying will make sense to you. So now what I'm going to do is I might have to make my camera a little higher for you guys to actually see this. Probably should have done that before. And let it focus. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to, I have all 3 pieces of paper folded. Now I'm going to arrange them like this. One with the open face facing that way. Then the next one I'm going to actually do in the reverse direction. And I'm going to overlap these 2 there. And then the final one will be in the same direction with the open face facing out, the same direction as this first one. So then take this, and it'll overlap this one. So there'll be a little bit of overlapping. We want to have 4 square faces on one side of the accordion book. So that's why we're doing it this way. And then what you'll do is you'll use glue to glue this one to that one to this one, and then you will have an accordion book. So in terms of gluing, what I'm going to use is just a regular old glue stick that I happen to have at my house. Many of you might just have a regular glue stick, so that actually works the best. If we were back in school, that's actually what I would have you guys use. But if you have Elmer's glue, if you have any kind of craft glue, pretty much any glue at all that you can get your hands on, you can use for this step. I'm making sure as I glue this, it's going, like the edge of this piece of paper is going right into the fold. So I could even press it down like this. You want to make sure that if, because you're making an accordion book, it is supposed to fold up together in the end. So you make sure as you're gluing that it folds up together correctly. So that looks pretty good. And then just one more. Gonna glue that one. So just kind of like laying out my plan before I tackle each step, before I actually get the glue into the mix, make sure it all lines up right. and I know which direction I'm going in before I actually glue it down. This glue stick is super cheesy and cheap and almost dried out. You might be in a similar situation. Just do the best you can. I'm pressing down really hard with the glue so that it at least gets some glue on there. Because this is not heavy paper, just a thin film of glue is fine. If you're using glue like this from a bottle, I would probably put a little bit on, like, say, a paper plate, or if you have a little cup like this you could use, and then use like maybe a scrap of cardboard or something to apply it onto the paper so it doesn't get all lumpy and bumpy. You could use a paintbrush if you're doing it that way too. And then same thing, you want to make sure you get it into the crease as much as you can. Sometimes it helps to lay it down. Before I press it down, I'm just going to make sure that that fits together well. Yes. And now I'll press it. A good thing to do when you're done with this step is maybe just stick it under a book overnight so that when it dries, it dries together flat, nice and neat and crisp. But that is my accordion book. You can view it this way too. So now what I have here is 4 square surfaces to make 4 separate designs on for my design project. So now I'm just going to demonstrate what to do if you're in the situation where all you have is printer paper to work with. This is not the ideal paper to work with because printer paper is thin. It's very smooth, so it doesn't really have like a grain to it or any kind of texture to it like you might notice your sketchbook paper might have, or if you have watercolor paper at home or any type of like thick, good quality paper would definitely be better than printer paper. But I understand that some of you might just be in the situation where like that's all you have and you can't get anything better. If you do have access to something better, or you can get your hands on something better, please do, because it's going to be a much better result. But just understanding that not everybody has that facility or capability to get those better materials. So if you're working with printer paper, then this is how to go about it. So I've got my printer paper here, and I've already gone ahead and folded these in half, but you can just pretend that I didn't. So the printer paper, as you can see, is much smaller. So your accordion book will end up being a bit smaller. Now that you've seen how we're going to construct this, it might make more sense the way I'm figuring out my measurements, because I want to have a square format for each design. I have to think in terms of like halves. Okay, so a regular piece of printer paper measures 11 inches on the long side. So 11 inches split in half is 5.5, right? So, and I had just folded it before, but we could do that step after. So to make a square with 5.5 length, it has to measure 5.5 up, right? To get a square format. I don't really want you making a design on a rectangle like this in the end. I want it to be more of a square. So it would stand to reason that we're going to measure, like we did the last one, 5.5 going up the side. 5.5 by 5.5 is kind of small. I know I'm saying I'm wanting squares, so I'm going to round this side up to 6 just to give you a little extra room. I don't want these accordion books to get any smaller than 6 by 6 or 6 by 5.5. Your square can't really be any smaller than 6 by 6, because otherwise you're really not going to get a chance to demonstrate your knowledge of design. So just showing you how I did that. I'm lining this up to the 6. I was not ready to make a video today. I should have figured this all out before trying to muddle through, but... Okay. And then taking my ruler now, just holding it sideways so you guys can kind of see within the frame. Holding my ruler up to the mark here, carefully up to the mark there, and then drawing my line. Okay, and then I'm gonna do the same thing. Now, if you don't feel comfortable cutting it all together, what you'll have to do is on all 3 sheets of the paper, do the same thing. Draw a line and then you can cut them each individually. But because they're all the same size, it's easy for me to just do one, stack them up all together, and then cut them all together. As long as I'm holding on to it tight so things don't shift around and I'm careful, that should work out just fine. So save some steps if you'd like to. So the next step is same as before. You're going to fold each of the sheets of paper in half, which I've done here already, but just to simulate what you'll do. Carefully fold. So when you're folding, just line up corner to corner. Fold in half. So now each one of your designs will be pretty much square, but that's a decent enough size surface to do your design on. And then you'll set it up the same way, right? So just to reiterate from before, in case this one's actually a little bit easier to show the whole thing in the view because it's smaller. But you'll have your 2 facing in one direction and then basically 1 facing in the opposite direction, and it'll overlap in 2 points on two of the sides. And then you'll glue, just like I demoed before. And in the end, for those of you using printer paper, you will still have a 4-faced accordion book, but it will just be a little bit smaller than the other one. So actually, I'll lay them side by side so you can see the difference. So this is the size of my printer paper accordion book. This is the size of my better paper accordion book. Right, so that's obviously going to be a lot better. There's going to be a lot more room to have fun and work out your designs with on the bigger one, of course. So I would suggest going this route, but if this is all you have to work with, then that is what you'll work with.